This is J. Krishnamurti's fifth public talk in Paris, 1969.
We have been talking about the chaos in the world, the confusion not only outwardly, but also inwardly. That there is a great deal of violence, both outwardly and inwardly. This violence is the result of fear. And we went into the question of fear pretty deeply and I think rather thoroughly. We also touched upon pleasure and pain and sorrow. What is implied in living, loving and dying. We went into these questions fairly thoroughly, and I think we ought to go this evening into something perhaps that may be a little foreign to most of you who listen to what is going to be said, but it must be considered and not merely rejected, saying that it is an illusion, a fancy, a bourgeois concept, and so on. Throughout history, man, realizing his life is very short, full of accidents, sorrow, and in the inevitable death, he always sought or invented or formulated an idea which he called God. Because he realized, as we do now also, that life is very short, transient, full of misery and confusion, and he wants to experience something that is vastly greater, supreme. Experience something that is not put together by the mind or by emotion. He wants to experience or feel his way into a world that is entirely different. A world that is not of this, that transcends, goes beyond all misery, torture, and in hopes to find it by seeking, searching out. I think we ought to go into this question together rather deeply. Whether there is or there is not a reality, doesn't matter what name one gives to it, that is of altogether of a different dimension. And to penetrate into its depth, one must naturally not merely understand at the verbal level, realizing that the description is never the described. The word is never the thing. Realizing that, to really, if we could, this evening, penetrate into the mystery, if it is a mystery. A mystery that man has always been trying to enter, capture it, invite it, hold it, worship it, and become a devotee. Our life, being what it is, rather shallow, empty, a tortuous affair without much meaning, we try to invent a significance, give a meaning to life. If one is very clever, the significance, the purpose, becomes rather complex. And not finding the beauty, love, or a sense of immensity in life, one either becomes cynical, not believing in anything, or inventing a theory, a supposition, a significance that seems to fill one's life. And I think it would be rather absurd and illusory and without much meaning if we merely invented an ideology or formula saying that there is or that there is not God, that life has no meaning whatsoever, which is true. As we live, it has no meaning. But don't let us invent a meaning. So, if we could go together, take a journey, and discover for ourselves if there is or if there is not a reality which is not merely an intellectual, emotional invention or an escape. And man, throughout history, both traditionally and actually, said that there is a reality for which you must prepare. You must do certain things. You must discipline yourself tremendously. Resist every form of temptation. Sex, control yourself, conform to a pattern established by the religious authorities, saints, and so on. You must deny the world and withdraw into some monastery or to some cave where you can meditate, not be tempted. Be alone. Search out. And one sees also the absurdity of such thing, that one cannot possibly escape from the world, from what is, from the suffering, from the distractions, from all the things that man has put together in science. Also, all the theoretical theologies. One must obviously discard all theologies, all beliefs. And one does completely put aside every form of belief, and there is no fear whatsoever. And which we went into that. And knowing, observing, seeing that social morality is no morality whatsoever. It is not moral, it's immoral. And yet one must be extraordinarily moral. After all, morality is only bringing about order within oneself and outwardly in action, not merely an idea or a conceptual morality, but actually in behavior. And to discipline oneself. Is it possible without suppression, control, escape? Discipline means, the root meaning of that word is to learn, not to conform, not to become a disciple of somebody, not to imitate, not to suppress, but to learn. And that very act of learning demands discipline, not imposed, not accommodating itself to environment, adjusting itself to some idea or ideology. Because without such learning, and without that deep austerity, not the austerity of the monk with his harshness, our behavior in daily life only leads to disorder. And one can see how essential it is to have complete mathematical order in oneself. Order, such order is not relative. Is not comparative. Is not brought about by environmental influence. Behavior, which is righteousness, must be established for them so that the mind is completely in order, without any distortion. Otherwise, a mind that is highly tortured, frustrated, shaped by environment, conforming to the social morality, must in itself be confused. And a confused mind, obviously, cannot discover what is true. So, if we are going to encounter, if the mind is going to come upon that strange mystery, if there is such thing, it must lay the foundation of behavior, a morality which is not that of the society, a morality in which there is no fear whatsoever, and therefore free. It's only then, after laying this deep foundation, then we can proceed to find out not only what is meditation, but also the quality of a silence, of observation, in which the observer is not. If this basis of righteous behavior does not take place in one's life, in one's action, meditation has very little meaning. You know, there are many schools in the Orient which has been brought over to the West. Systems, methods of meditation, including the Zen, including yoga. First of all, one must be very clear in understanding this whole methodology. Through a method, through a system, through conforming to a certain pattern or tradition, the mind can come upon that reality. One can see how absurd the whole thing is. whether it's brought from the East or one invents it here. A method implies conformity, a repetition. A method implies someone who has reached a certain enlightenment and begins to say, do this and don't do that. Then you will have that. And we who are so eager to have that, and so we follow, we conform, we obey, practice, day after day, like a lot of machinery, like a lot of machines, what we have been told. A dull mind, an insensitive mind, a mind that is not highly intelligent, can practice a method endlessly. It'll become more and more dull, more and more stupid. And it'll have its own experience within the field of its own stupidity, within its own field of conditioning. So if one sees very clearly for oneself, understands that method in any form, a system that makes you practice day after day to become aware, to become sensitive, is quite the contrary. It doesn't make you sensitive. I do not know if you ever tried it. Some of you perhaps have been to the East and have studied what meditation is. There is a whole tradition behind it. Tradition which exists in India, which exploded in the ancient days in the whole of Asia. And that tradition now still holds the mind. Volumes are written on it. And any form of tradition which is to carry over from the past to find out if there is great reality is obviously untrue. Mind must be free of every form of spiritual tradition sanction. Otherwise, one becomes dull, insensitive, utterly lacking the highest form of intelligence. Then what is meditation if it is not traditional? And it cannot be traditional. No one can teach you. You can't follow a particular path and say, through that, along that path, you learn what meditation is. The whole idea of meditation is for the mind to become completely quiet. Not only at the conscious level, but also at the deep, secret, hidden levels of consciousness. So it's completely, utterly quiet. So that thought doesn't wander all over the place. So then one says, thought must be controlled. That's one of the part of the tradition of meditation. The traditional approach we are talking about, which must be totally set aside. And to set aside, one must look at it very closely, objectively, non-emotionally. The tradition says you must have a guru, a teacher, to help you to meditate. He will tell you what to do. Probably all this may be strange to you. But to the West, they have their own form of tradition. Which is prayer, contemplation, confession. But the whole idea that someone else knows and you don't know, and the one who knows is going to teach you, give you enlightenment. In that is implied authority. The master, the guru, the savior, the son of God, and so on and on and on. They know and you don't know. And they say, follow this method, this system. Do it day after day, practice, and you will eventually get it if you are lucky. Which means you're fighting with yourself all day long, because trying to conform to a pattern, to a system that is trying to suppress your own desires, your own appetites, your own envies, jealousies, ambitions. And so they're what you are and what should be according to the system. So there is a contradiction, which means effort. And a mind that is making an effort at any time can never be quiet. Through effort, mind cannot become completely still. And tradition also says, control your thought, which is to concentrate. If you learn to concentrate as a schoolboy does, you're merely resisting, building a wall around yourself. An exclusive, focusing on one idea or a principle or a picture or what you will. Such form of concentration is exclusiveness, resistance. And the tradition says you must go through that in order to find whatever they want to find. And the tradition says also, you must be, as all the saints who are more or less neurotic have always said, you must have no sex. You must not look at this world. which again is there a particular form of neurosis or tradition. And when you see all that, not merely verbally or intellectually, but actually see what is involved in all this. And you can only see it if you're not committed to it. Then you can look at it objectively. Those who bring various forms of meditation from the East, saying the great tradition is to go into certain trance states and all the rest of it. If you see the implication of all that, and then when you discard it completely, and one must discard it completely, because then the mind, in the very discarding, becomes free and therefore intelligent, aware, and not be caught in false illusions. So, one must first be virtuous, moral, to meditate in the deepest sense of that word. Not the morality of a pattern or a practice or the social morality, but the morality that comes naturally, inevitably, sweetly, when you begin to understand yourself, when you go into yourself very deeply. That is, when you are aware of your thought, your feelings, your activities, your appetites, your ambition, and so on. Aware without any choice, but merely observe. Then out of that observation comes right action, which has nothing to do with an idea and conformity of action according to an ideal. Then, when that is deeply in oneself, with its austerity and beauty, in which there is not a particle of harshness, and harshness only exists when there is effort, then one has observed all the systems, all the methods, all the promises, and looked at them objectively, without like or dislike. Then you can discard all those traditions, including the guru, including the master, the teacher, the savior, so that your mind is free altogether from the past. Then we can proceed to find out what meditation is. And I hope, at least for this evening, you are listening and doing it. Not merely hearing a lot of words, because words are very treacherous. One becomes slave to words. And one can observe how the words play extraordinarily important part in one's life. And bearing in mind that the word is not the thing or the description is not the described, then we can take the journey together to find out what meditation means. If you have not done the other, that is, laid the foundation, actually, not theoretically, then you can play with meditation, and that has no meaning. It's like those people who go out to the East, go to some master who will tell you how to sit, how to breathe, what to do, this or that, and come back and write a book and say that some glorious tradition is being established, which is all sheer nonsense. So, one has to be a teacher for oneself and a disciple of oneself. So there is no authority. There is only understanding. And the understanding is only possible when there is observation without the center as the observer. I do not know if you have ever observed, watched, or tried to find out what is understanding. Understanding is not an intellectual process. Understanding is not as an intuition or a feeling. When one says, I understand something very clearly, there is an observation out of complete silence. It's only then there is understanding. When you yourself say, I understand something, you mean that. That the mind listens very quietly, neither agreeing or disagreeing. And in that state listens completely. It's only then there is understanding. And that understanding is action. It's not understanding first and action follows afterwards. It is simultaneous. It is one movement. So meditation, if we can use that word, which is so heavily loaded by the traditionalists, is to bring about, without effort, without any form of compulsion, a mind and the brain to its highest capacity, which is intelligence, which is to be highly sensitive. The brain, with all, which is the repository of the past, which has evolved through million years to be what it is now. That brain, which is constantly and incessantly, continuously active. You can observe it. For that brain to be quiet, and whether it is at all possible for that brain, which is reacting all the time, responding according to its conditioning, to the least noise, can that brain be still? That's the first question. And again, the traditionalists say it can be made still by, oh, need we go into all this? I suppose I must. By proper breathing, by control, by practicing awareness. Which again involves who is the entity that controls, that practices, that shapes the brain. It is still thought. Thought which says, I am the observer, and I am going to control the brain, put an end to thought. But thought bred the thinker. And is it possible for the brain to be completely quiet? That's part of meditation, to find out, not to be told how to do it. Nobody can tell us how to do it. And don't let us play with all that kind of stuff. Whether your brain, which is so heavily conditioned through culture, through every form of experience, the brain which is the result of enormous evolution, can that brain be so still? Because without that, whatever it sees or experiences will be distorted, will be translated according to its conditioning. Here there is a problem that arises which is rather worthwhile to go into. What part does sleep play in meditation, in living? Please do follow this little bit. It's quite interesting because if you have gone into it yourself, not according to the professionals, you will discover a great deal. As we said the other day, dreams are unnecessary. And we said when the mind, brain and everything, when one is completely aware during the day, attentive to what is happening both outwardly and inwardly. Inwardly, the reactions to the outer, and the outer, with its strains, evoking certain other reactions. To be aware of all of that. During the day, attentive to the intimation of the unconscious, deeper layers and the hints. And at the end of the day, to take all that into account. Because if you don't take all that has happened at the end of the day into account, the brain has to work at night, when you are asleep, to bring an order into itself, which is obvious, isn't it? I wonder if you're following all this. I hope you are. It doesn't matter. That is, during the day, be completely attentive, at the end of the day, to take stock of what has happened and bring order, not disorder, among so many events, then when you go to sleep, you are learning quite a different thing altogether about your learning at a different dimension altogether. And that's part of meditation. So, is this getting rather complex? Hope not. There is the laying of that foundation of behavior in which action is love, and the discarding of all tradition, so the mind is completely free, and the brain, which is so conditioned. Can that brain be completely quiet? If you have gone into it, you will see it can be. Not through any trick, not through any drug, but through that active awareness and passive also throughout the day, and taking stock at the end of the day of what has happened, and therefore bringing order. And when the mind, when there is sleep, the brain is quiet, learning learning with a different movement. And so the whole body, the brain, everything is quiet, without any form of distortion. And it is only then that if there is any reality, such a mind can receive it, see it. It cannot invite it. That immensity, if there is such an immensity, if there is the nameless, the transcendental, if there is such thing, it's only such a mind can see the false or the true of that reality. You might say, what has all this got to do with living? I have to live this everyday life, going to the office, washing dishes, going in a crowded bus, noise. What has meditation got to do with all this? After all, meditation is the understanding of life. The life of every day with all its complexity, misery, sorrow, loneliness, despair, the drive to become famous, success, the fear, envy. To understand all that is meditation. And without understanding it. Mere attempt to find the mystery is utterly empty, useless, has no value. It's like a disordered life, a disordered mind, trying to find what is mathematically order. So meditation has everything to do with life. It isn't going off into some emotional, ecstatic state. There is ecstasy which is not pleasure. That ecstasy comes only when there is this mathematical order in oneself which is absolute. Therefore, meditation is the way of life of every day. And it is only then that which is imperishable, which has no time, can come into being. Do you want to ask any questions about it? Yes, sir. Je vous en prie. Yes, I understood, sir. Bien, bien. Is that, yes, and that's clear. And what is this energy? Yes. Who looks? And yes, sir. That's who looks, the observer. And what is this energy? Neither did I. Oh la la. I don't know about that. Look, sir, there are two things involved in this, as far as I understand. And if I don't understand, please correct it. Who is the observer that's aware of its own reactions? That's what you asked. Have you looked at anything without reaction? Have you looked at a tree, or the face of a woman, or the mountain, or a cloud, or the light on the water, just to observe it, without translating it into like or dislike, pleasure or pain, just to observe? And in that observation, which is when you are completely attentive, is there an observer? Do it, sir, don't ask me. If you do it, you'll find out. So, to observe the reactions without judging, evaluating, distorting, saying this is good, this is bad. to so completely be attentive of every reaction. In that attention, you will see there is no observer or the thinker or the experiencer at all. Then the second question, if I have understood rightly, is, perhaps the speaker is adding more to it than is the questioner asked. To do all this, to find out for oneself what is behavior and act, what is love, what is living, what is dying. All that, to discover it and live it, requires energy. Physical, as well as intellectual, as well as the energy of affection. It needs tremendous energy. Because to change anything in oneself, to bring about a transformation, a revolution in the psyche, needs energy. And how is that energy to be had? You know, we have energy now in tension, through contradiction, through conflict. When there is a battle between two desires, between what I must and what I should, this contradiction. In that, it generates a great deal of energy. I don't know if you can see this. But if there is no contradiction whatsoever, then you have abundance of energy. I wonder if you're right. Look, sir, look at one's own life. Look at what actually do look at it. Your life. It's a contradiction. You want to be peaceful and you hate somebody. You want to love and you're ambitious. There's a contradiction. So this contradiction breeds conflict, struggle. And that contradiction, that struggle wastes energy. And if there is no contradiction whatsoever, you have supreme energy to transform yourself. So, one asks, how is it possible to have no contradiction? No contradiction between the observer and the observed, between the experiencer and the experience, between love and hate, this duality. How is it possible to live without duality? And it is only possible when there is only the fact and nothing else. The fact that you hate, that you are violent, and not its opposite. When you are afraid, the opposite is the courage, is to develop courage, which is a form of resistance. And therefore, in that, there's a contradiction, and there is effort, and the strain, and all the rest of it. but to understand completely what fear is and not escape into the opposite. And when you give your whole attention to fear, there is not only the cessation of fear psychologically, but also you have the energy that is needed to confront fear. And the traditionalists say, you must have this energy. Therefore, don't be sexual. Don't be worldly. Concentrate, put your mind on God or whatever the idea is. Run out, leave the world, don't be tempted. All in order to have this energy. But the poor chap is part of the world. He's still a human being. He's own appetites. He's burning inside with sexual, biological urges. He wants to do this. He's controlling, he's forcing, and all the rest of it. Therefore, he's wasting energy in controlling his appetites. But if you live with the fact and nothing else, if you're angry, understand it, not how to be not angry. Go into it, be with it, live with it, give your complete attention to it. And you will see, then you have this energy in abundance. And it is this energy that keeps the mind clear, your heart open, so that there is an abundance of love, not ideas, not sentiment. What do you mean by ecstasy? Can you describe it? Knowing that the description is not the described? What do you mean by ecstasy? I also said, the speaker also said, ecstasy is not pleasure. Love is not pleasure, which is not puritanical. We went into that in the previous meetings. So what is ecstasy? You know, when you look at a cloud, the light in that cloud, there is beauty. And beauty is passion. Passion is not the root meaning of that word, which is sorrow. When you see the beauty of a cloud or the beauty of light on a tree, to see that beauty, there must be passion. There must be intensity. It is this intensity, this passion, in which there is no sentiment whatsoever, no feeling of like or dislike. Then there is ecstasy, which is not personal. This ecstasy is not yours or mine, like love is not yours or mine. When there is pleasure, it's yours and mine. So, meditation is part of that ecstasy. And when you really know, when there is that meditative mind, then it has its own ecstasy which is not to be described, not to be put into words. Yes, sir. Allez-y. Yes. Are you saying that that there is no good and bad, and all reactions are good? Are you saying that? No, sir, I didn't say that. I said, observe your reaction. Don't call it good or bad. When you do call it good and bad, you bring about in it a contradiction. Just, sir, have you ever observed, looked at your wife or husband, your boy or girlfriend? Have you ever looked without the image? Right? Have you ever looked at your wife? I'm sorry to keep at it. Without the image that you have about her? The image that you have put together for 30 or so many years. So, you have an image about her and she has an image about you. And these images have relationship, not you and she. And these images come into being when you're not attentive in your relationship. It's this inattention that breeds the image. Now, can one look at the tree, the cloud, the wife, the husband, the woman, the man, their reactions, without condemning, evaluating, saying this right, this wrong, this must be, this might, just to observe, without bringing in your prejudices? Then you will say, there's a totally different kind of action that comes from that observation. I think that's enough, isn't it?